Welcome, and thank you very much for taking your time today to come. Thank you to all the participants, and thank you to Petra Bergner, who is our facilitator. I'm Kathleen Mattheos, the Director of the Center for Higher Education Research and Development at University of Manitoba, and I join you from a very cold and chilly Treaty 1 territory and home of the Métis Nation. Actually, yesterday I heard that we've had the coldest March in 124 years. That is from when since settlers came and started recording. I'm sure the inhabitants, the original peoples of this area would probably have much more history of very cold marches. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Petra. We are recording this webinar and it will be posted on CHERD. So you'll be aware of that, so that if you have colleagues that weren't able to attend, they will be able to watch it. I'll turn it over to you. Petra joins us, and I'll let her introduce herself, and she joins us from another area of Canada. So go ahead, Petra.
Thanks, Kathleen. Hi, everybody. My name is Petra Bergner, and I'm joining you from Fredericton, New Brunswick today, and I'm at the University of New Brunswick. Before we start, I want to do a traditional land acknowledgement. So I want to respectfully acknowledge that the University of New Brunswick, we stand on the unsurrendered and unceded traditional Wolastoq Way lands, and it's the land of the Wabaniki people, and they're recognized in a series of peace and friendship treaties to establish an ongoing relationship of peace, friendship, and mutual respect between equal nations. So wherever each of you are at today, I hope that you just take a moment and reflect on the land acknowledgements of your university. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. We're going to be able to spend 1 hour together talking about the art of asking the perfect question. And if you have any questions, please feel free to either ask them through the chat or put up your hand and or raise your hand, and we can pause throughout the session. Kathleen is going to help monitor questions for me because I can't really see it at the bottom of my screen. And I'm just going to jump right in. Give me 1 second.
And as we have a small group, I can, either put up your hand as Petra said, or pop your questions in.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So have you ever wondered why some people just seem to have that gift or ability to ask that perfect question? I have, and what really hit me in the last year or so has been really watching, surprisingly or not, when Barbara Walters passed away. And for people who don't know who Barbara Walters was, she spent almost her entire career in media, and she had interviewed many public people who, some of them were very happy to be in the public eye, but other people had never had interviews before. And she was not known for being an extrovert, but she always managed to grab the most extraordinary interviews out of people. And watching other people throughout my career, it always amazed me how they seem to know how to ask that perfect question. So I'm hoping by the end of our session today, you're going to walk away with a couple nuggets that you can actually learn how to ask the perfect question. Give me 1 second here. Whoops. Sorry. So asking the perfect question isn't about talking. Ironically enough, it's about listening. And this is one of my favorite proverbs that has probably resonated with me the most. And it's a Native American proverb, and it's listen or your tongue will make you deaf. And the next few slides, we're really going to talk about the power of listening and how you actually can learn more information by letting silence be your friend. And we're going to be focusing on 4 key areas We talked a little bit about listening, how being curious and asking questions based on curiosity is really going to help you in coming up with powerful questions and being intentional. So asking those questions that are intentional, that are going to get you to the core of what you think could be the potential issue, and being intentional, which we just talked about, but being vulnerable. And sometimes being vulnerable is the hardest part of asking questions, because it means that you need to be courageous enough to lean into those most difficult conversations and ask the really hard questions. And that's sometimes where the magic happens, when you're in a coaching meeting or another kind of conversation to get the information out. And then we're going to walk through powerful questions. And there's going to be 3 stages to this that I'm going to give you probably 5 or 6 examples of questions that you could ask that could help you as starting points. I'm not sure if anyone has ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In his habit number 5, he talks about seek first to understand, then to be understood. And before I read the book, it took me a while to get my head around that. And what I finally realized is that's probably the most important part of coaching or asking a question, is you really need to understand where that person is coming from. So whether it's in negotiations, whether it's having a difficult meeting, is if you truly understand where they're going to come from, that's where you're going to shift the paradigm, and you're going to really move them from seeing what their concern is, watching how their behavior shifts from that, seeing what they're doing, and then getting into that positive behavior that you want to see. Some of the other root causes of listening are trust. If you don't trust the person you're having a conversation with, you're really not going to be honest with how what the core issues are. And a good example of this is if you're having a not so great day or not so great moment, and someone asks how you're doing, your canned response is you're going to say, you know what, I'm doing really, really great. I don't know if anyone else has said that, but inside you're kind of crumbling inside. That's because maybe you just don't want to get into it. You don't have time, or you don't really trust that person enough to be transparent with what's really going on. You may have different values. So if you're in negotiations, this is where values really come into play. If you're talking about what the other person really wants, would really like, whether it's monetary, whether it's another issue, listening is going to be the only way you're going to understand what it is. In my experience in being in human resources, when we see employees who have conflict, usually it's because it's a value. And how we communicate with each other, if we listen, usually communication goes well. But if we're really not listening intently or listening with an open heart, that's where communication can go off the rails. Also, if we don't have our own personal agenda, and it doesn't have to be as nefarious as it sounds. It could be that something as simple as you want people to agree to changing a meeting, but you really want to do it for your own purpose. So if you're asking questions based on getting them to agree where you want to go, you're really not listening. Or if you're waiting for the person to speak, not hearing them, but you're in your mind, you're thinking, okay, what's the best response that I could say right now? And sometimes we do that if we have somebody who is confrontational or aggressive, or if we're really not aware of the answer, it's easy for us just to really not hear what they're saying because we could be uncomfortable or really unsure. I don't know about you. This is where I fall into the biggest trap, is mind traffic. Sometimes my brain feels like a superhighway. I've got so much thoughts going on about what I need to get done in the day, maybe what happened in the last meeting, what do I want to make for dinner, our plans, what's going on in the next little while, that sometimes I kind of zone out of conversations. And I'm not really I'm hearing, but I'm not listening intently. And I'm losing track of the important things that people are saying. And if I'm focused on my own outcome, so if I come into a conversation with a specific outcome, I'm not really listening intently. I'm listening to get my own way. And from Covey's Habit 5, he talks about paradigms and how can you move from an ineffective listening paradigm to an effective. So again, if you're listening with that intent to respond or reply, you're not really listening. So as you're in a conversation, and I would really challenge you, maybe if you have a meeting after this one or when you go home tonight, the next conversation you have, really trying to listen with the intent to understand and really trying to hear where that person is coming from. So here's my 4 favorite ones. And when I'm going into either a coaching conversation, a serious meeting with someone, or a negotiation, I always keep these things in the back of my mind because I really try hard not to get into this. So we're all helpers at heart, and we really want to try to do the best that we can do. So going into a conversation or going into a question, we're not here to give advice or to solve the problems or to advise. We're here to listen and how to ask that great question. And probing, when we're asking questions, we're not asking questions with the intent of our own frame of reference or our own personal agenda. When you ask a question, it's coming from curiosity so that you can really understand where that person is coming from. And if you find that you're asking questions because you want that person to agree with you, or you really want them to be on side with you, just press the pause button in your mind and throw that away and really start listening and asking questions from a curiosity perspective. This is another really common one, interpreting, or I'll call it mirroring. You're trying to mirror why people do things based on your own experiences. If somebody does something, it's easy to say, oh, you know what? I know exactly why they're doing that because I've done that in my past, or I've seen my kids do that in the past. Try to put that on pause because everybody has different values and different life experiences. So while we may have a similar experience on the surface, we all have very different motivations and behaviors for why we're doing things. And it's the why and the how is what we're trying to discover. And then finally, evaluating. You're there not to judge or to get the person to agree with you or disagreeing with you. It's not a contest and it's not a court of law. You're really just trying to listen. Those sound really easy to do, but if you're talking about something that's contentious, it has conflict, or if it's a value for you, that could be really hard. Or if the other person is coming in hot and they may be a bit angry, it's hard to put those aside. What I find the best listeners are people who are empathetic, that they don't have to agree with you, but they understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. And if you can, try to reflect what the other person is saying in your own words, and that just shows that you really are listening. You don't have to do it every sentence. You don't have to do it word for word, but you can just do it in a high level summary, and it really connects with a person and shows that you truly get where they're coming from. And again, you're not there to listen to advise, solve the problem, fix things, change it, analyze, or figure it out. You're there to listen. And usually, if you can ask that perfect question, The person has the magic inside of them. They know the answer. Sometimes they just need a different frame of reference in helping solve the problem. And that's the beauty of coaching, or the art of asking the perfect question, is when you almost see a light bulb go off in the person's brain. That's when they get it and they have all the answers. Your role is just to guide them to it. And again, another proverb, because we can never have too much. This is another one of my favorite ones. Listen with a virtuous heart to be a better listener. And it's all about looking at people's body language just to see how they're feeling, because you can see if people are getting uncomfortable or if they're starting to cry, you know that it's important to them. Or if they're not engaged, you know that your questions aren't landing, and make eye contact with them. And when you're listening with your ears, it means that the other person is doing most of the talking. And usually in the art of asking the perfect question, the other person is doing at least 80% of the talking, and you're doing 20%, if that, of the talking. So try to remember the 80-20 rule. So I think we've talked about this already, but be open and curious, maintain that eye contact, try not to interrupt if you can. Ask those clarifying questions if you're not sure, and keep asking more questions, because sometimes it's like the layer of the onion. You just got to keep peeling back the layers, and you're just going to, I call it the 5 whys. So why are you doing that? You may be doing it because you think it's producing more productivity. Well, how is it producing more productivity? And if you can kind of keep layering those questions, it really helps people think about something more. So curiosity, you know, that silly saying, curiosity killed the cat. Not in coaching. In coaching, it's fabulous to be curious, and that's what we want people to be. I have 4 cats, by the way, so I'm not being mean to anybody who loves cats. So when you're curious, you're asking questions. You don't have a hidden agenda. You're simply trying to be curious to hear more about what the person's trying to tell you. And try to model curiosity, not just in your coaching conversations, but in your own leadership style. And how you can do that is when you're talking to people, whether it's in a meeting or you're walking around, ask people to tell you more about that. If they mention something that they're concerned about, ask them what's the real issue that they're concerned about, because usually it's not the first issue that they bring about. And keep priming that pump of curiosity. Teams need to have the awareness and permission to be curious. So if they say you as the leader being curious, you're giving them permission to create that culture of curiosity, and that's where innovation happens. On my team, we constantly ask questions because they see me asking questions, and I never stop, because for me, I'm constantly curious about the how and the why we do things. And I think if we stop being curious, then we become stale and we don't grow. Be intentional. So if you can imagine a world where you decide to create an intent that was always about honoring other people, wouldn't that be a fabulous world to live in? And how would an intent like that play out in your behaviors, your actions, and your approach? Well, when you're coaching, to find out what your intent is, ask yourself, what's the real reason you're doing this? Just bear with me for a second. I've got something on the middle of my screen here that we're recording, and I'm blanking out here. It's what do you believe about yourself and the person you're coaching in relation to the situation? Because you constantly want to be intentional, and your head needs to be in the game. And now that you know what your intent is, how do you channel that when you're coaching someone? And when I use coaching, I'm a certified executive coach. You don't have to be a certified coach to have a coaching conversation. To be curious and ask that perfect question, You're having coaching conversations every single day, and this is going to make you more mindful. So modify your behavior so that your only role is to listen and be curious until you understand the issue. And sometimes that could take, if you're coaching someone for an hour, that could take you an hour to really understand what the issue is. And that's okay, because once you understand what the issue is, then you can move to the next step. And the biggest support or the biggest gift you can offer the other person with intention is with outcomes and actions. Because if you don't have outcomes and actions, your goals are only a dream or a wish. So whenever I'm coaching or having a conversation with somebody, I always ask what their next step is and how do they know what success is. And they have a plan. Even if it's just a small plan, at least they have an action plan to move forward. And when you're intentional with your questions, you're always going to be asking what people's goals are, what people's next steps are, and you're going to have that self-awareness of your own agenda. And pretty soon it's going to come so natural for you that it's not going to be about you, it's going to be about them. And sometimes for me, where I have to be really intentional, if it's a subject that I'm really, really passionate about, because then I want to roll up my sleeves and dive in and really start to help. And I have to back up and think, okay, it's not about me helping or solving or resolving. It's about how can I ask the right question so the other person could walk away and they can resolve the issue. So we've talked about why is it so hard to be present? Very similar issues to why is it so hard to listen. Again, staying present in the moment, focusing whatever's on your mind and pressing the pause button. Really being aware of your outcomes. It's not about us. It's not about our agenda. It's not about formulating a response. And trying to build trust with someone is tough. So if you're going to be having a conversation with someone and they don't trust you, that's going to be really difficult to do. And it's going to be difficult if depending on what the issue is. So if you're negotiating with someone, I'll start first off by how are we going to be building trust with ourselves and talk about what's acceptable behavior in the negotiations, just to build some trust with ourselves and talk about a safe container in the room. If I'm actually coaching people, if they don't trust me, then I'll recommend that they have another coach, because it's not about me again. It has to work for the other person in the relationship. So how do you prepare to ask the right questions? So you're open, you're curious, you're maintaining that eye contact. And I can't emphasize that enough. People want to know that you care and that you're listening. If you're looking at your phone or looking out the window, it shows that you just don't care about what that person is saying. And just keep asking more questions. So here's one of my favorite areas. This is always the hardest thing when you're having conversations with people that ask the perfect question, is when the topic becomes uncomfortable. How do you lean into conflict and be vulnerable? So question for you, do you think it's better to lean in or lean away when you're not comfortable or you know the other person's not comfortable? Any thoughts about that? Does one person want to jump in with a thought, or do you think leaning in or leaning away?
Just put up your hand and I'll be happy to open it up. Any thoughts?
No? Oh, don't be shy. We're all friends here. Pam, just because you're the first person I can see on my screen, do you mind if I ask what your thoughts are?
All right. Well, my instinct says to lean away.
Oh, okay, good. So tell me about your instincts.
Well, because I'm uncomfortable, and if I want to be less uncomfortable, I would lean away from it because I want to be more comfortable, and that seems to be human brain instinct to be more comfortable.
You're right.
But I would think you would actually need to lean into it to figure out what the issue is.
Bingo. You're very right. And that's difficult to do, isn't it, Pam?
Oh yeah, anything that makes you uncomfortable, we just don't want to do.
Oh my gosh, isn't that the truth?
My couch more often.
Oh, sorry, Pam, I missed what you just said.
I would be getting off my couch and onto my bike more often.
Oh my goodness, me too, me too. So Pam is actually right. Nobody likes conflict, and it really is easier not to ask that hard question. But force yourself to lean in, and asking that question will help you push through it. It's going to help you, and it's going to help the other person, because you need to be vulnerable to tap into those areas that make you feel uncomfortable. And that's where you're going to have the biggest growth. So whether you're meeting with a faculty member, a student, somebody on your team, or somebody who reports to you, or if you're in negotiations with a union, those are the best ways to get through an issue and build those relationships of trust. And Pam, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts with us. Now, this only works if you have a high trust relationship with each other. And it keeps coming down to trust. So if you don't have a high trust relationship, you're going to need to focus on that first. I'm not sure if you've heard of Brene Brown. She's one of my favorite authors. She is an expert in society. I would say social development and human issues. She does a lot of work on conflict. She has a lot of TED Talks, a few books. But what she talks about conflict and what she's learned is you really do need to lean into those negative emotions. And you have to be willing to have the tough conversations, because if you can have those tough conversations, it could be painful, and it probably will be painful, but that's how you're going to grow and you're going to become stronger, you and the other person. But you really need to know how to listen if you're going to ask the question, because you may not like what you hear, and it's probably going to be easy to be defensive, but it's not the place for it. You have to really listen. And you can't look to others for your own self-worth. So if you're leaning into conflict and asking those difficult questions, don't expect the other person to tell you how fabulous you are, because it's probably not going to happen in that conversation. And have the courage to get curious. So if the person isn't happy with your leadership style, or they're not happy with a policy you created, or they're not happy with the direction that you're following, be curious and ask them why, and ask them to tell you a little bit more about it, because you can learn a lot from what makes people unhappy, and that can help you move forward as well. So here's my favorite part of it, of this webinar. And please feel free to jump into questions. I think of all the focus on the webinar. This is the most important part. So the 3 stages of asking powerful questions is, the first stage is exploring. So you really need to understand what the issue is. And then you have to build a foundation. So you need to co-create a plan. And when I say co-create, your role only is to ask those powerful questions so the other person could create a plan. And then you're going to secure a commitment. Because if you don't have commitment from the other person, all you're going to have is a dream. And dreams really aren't worth anything in the coaching world, you need that commitment so they can move forward and grow. So the first question I always ask when I meet with somebody is, what would you like to focus on? So you don't have to ask all of these questions. I'm just picking 5 or 6 random questions just as a suggestion. Now, the benefit of asking, what would you like to focus on, really helps the person, as silly as this sounds, focus. And if they can narrow or focus what they want to talk about, it will help them. Otherwise, they could think, well, gosh, I want to talk about a lot of things, but what's that one thing I want to talk about today? Or the top 3 things I want to talk about. Sometimes I ask if they're struggling with not moving forward and they're truly stuck. I'll ask, what's getting in the way of achieving your goals? And what this question helps unlock for the other person is, what is getting in the way? Is it a resourcing issue? Is it the fact that they just haven't had time to sit down and plan or implement? Are their goals realistic? Is it lack of support from the people around them? Maybe they need a team in place. But by really asking what's getting in the way, it's going to help them determine how they can move their dream or their vision into a reality. And jump in at any time if you have any questions about the questions, pun intended. So sometimes it's hard to focus or narrow in on what's getting in the way or what they want to focus. So I'll really try to narrow it down even more. And what I'm trying to do is just narrow it down so much that I'm just keep bringing the person into like a really, really small pinpoint. So what will really make the biggest difference here? So if you can do one thing, what would that one thing look like for you? Now, if I would ask you that, so Pam, you and I have the same goal about getting off the couch to ride our bike. If I would ask you, what would that one thing make a difference for you on riding your bike? What do you think it would be, Pam?
Unfortunately, Pam got pulled into a meeting.
Oh, that's okay. But
But
those
we
are
have 5 other wonderful people.
perfect. So I can't think of it, and I can't see anyone's names, but does anyone have a similar fitness goal or a goal that they're struggling with?
Hi, Sasmir. Sasmar, I was just going to pick on you.
Okay, good. I'm glad you put
Yeah,
your hand up.
I'm sorry. It looks like I misspelled my name. It's Samar to make it easy for everybody.
Oh, okay. So no S, so Samar. Okay, thank you.
But yes, I mean, you really nailed it for me. I've been struggling with making sure that exercise becomes part of my routine. Is a bit of a challenge, and it impacts me when I ride my bike during the summertime.
Gotcha.
So what's getting in my way is probably committing to doing it, or being creative around incorporating it in my daily routine.
So Samira, that's actually a common goal, I think, or a common challenge that a lot of people have is making that commitment.
However, you know what? I have an experience I would like to share. So I have a constant chronic pain on my left leg. And I have done physiotherapy. I have done, you name it, okay? And then when I was doing the physiotherapy, I remember the therapist gave me a ball and said, what you need to do is every day, just lie down on the floor and use that ball on that area where there is muscle tightness, do the exercise. And I bought the ball. It's a tennis ball. Okay. And I do it one day. I don't do it for a week.
Mm.
Yesterday, I figured out how to make it a routine for me. When I
Oh.
am in the shower, I realize that I can use my hands and press hard with the same level of strength that is required and do the set of exercise that she asked me to do. And since yesterday, I don't have that terrible pain on my left leg.
Oh my gosh, that is a success.
And it was just something simple that I'd never thought
Wow.
of. But when I put my mind into it, and I just tried it while I was in the shower. I didn't even have the ball. I just used my hands.
Yep.
And I'm a much happier person today.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I could hear the happiness in your voice. So Samir, if you use that level of creativity, is there something creative that you can do to squeeze even 10 minutes of bike time into your day?
I usually do it during the summer, but I mean, to be ready, to be physically fit for doing that. So when I came to the office today, I looked at the chair and I was like, oh, why don't you do stretches sitting down?
Good.
And you can do this, for example, during the lunch break, if I go for a 30-minute walk and then I come back, so my muscles are ready, I can just do the stretches that are required from me. And that's going to make my life easier and happier. And at the same thing, I am not living with that constant pain.
Oh, I love that. And will that help you achieve your biking goal for the summer?
Hopefully, yes. I think yes.
Okay. So as far as, and I know life gets busy at work, how often a week do you think you could commit to walking a half an hour and stretching?
Well, the lunch hour, I mean, at least 3 times a week I can do that.
Good.
Because even if I am busy at 12 and I didn't take my lunch hour, maybe I can take it later on when I have less workload.
Nice.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Samir, so you could commit 3 times a week to doing that?
Yes, I like to be
Wonderful.
realistic. I don't think I can do it every day, but if I do it every other day, I should be okay.
Perfect. So if you do it every other day, would that look like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday?
Yeah.
Perfect. So Samir, by the next time we meet, could you commit to exercising Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next 4 weeks?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Congratulations. So Samir, how do you feel now that you've committed?
I feel a lot better because I am coming from a very, very dark hole. When it's not that you get used, but when pain becomes something chronic in your life that you wake up with, you sit with, you sleep with, it becomes very challenging. So just figuring out that simple exercise that I did, I just tweaked what she told me to do, and I take a shower twice a day. So the exercise is
Nice. That is awesome. So Samir, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story and allowing me to coach you. So do you see how that worked as far as being curious, asking questions, listening, and getting commitment? Did anything stand out for you in that 2-minute conversation? I think the biggest thing that stood out for me is Samira found something really creative that worked for her in the shower. She was able to transition that into her goal to get into shape for the summer. And she was able to commit to 3 days a week, but not just 3 days a week. She was able to land on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And she was able to commit to 4 weeks until we can meet again. So we've got her committed and we've got her excited. And it only took 2 minutes, maybe, Samir? Was that 2 minutes or a bit longer, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was just a couple of minutes. I don't know if you can hear me or see me because I'm unmuted. I can see that, but
yeah, I can't see you, but I can hear you though. So
okay.
Right. So that's just a really brief example of just how powerful questions can be. So you don't have to be an expert, just be curious.
Yes.
Another question could be, have you ever experienced something like this before? So I could have asked Samir, so how did he get into shape last summer for biking? Could have been another one. What's stopping you or what's getting in your way? So maybe not about goals, but what's stopping her right now? She mentioned committing through the day. So what's keeping you busy during the day? And we could have maybe probed on that a little more. What are you afraid of? This may not have worked for this one, but sometimes what gets in people's way is they could be afraid of conflict. They could be afraid of success, as silly as that sounds, or they could be afraid of just making waves or trying something new. And if you can find out what people are afraid of, then you can help them make a plan to kind of crash through those barriers. Samir.
Actually, what I wanted to share is that asking those powerful questions also helps in. So when I show vulnerability, or when sometimes we have our own ideas, or what I would call saboteurs that are sitting on my shoulders, and they are those negative voices.
Oh, gotcha.
Sometimes asking those questions help in realizing that what I am afraid of is not what I thought I was afraid of.
Yes. Isn't that true?
And
Yeah.
that's that aha moment.
It's so true, because those aha moments really help us. Because sometimes people are afraid of disappointment. They're afraid of failing, and and sometimes we're even trying it, and just understanding, and Samira's bang on. It's those saboteurs, right?
I'll tell you what, it's not, sometimes for me, it's not being afraid of disappointment. Is sometimes it could be doubting oneself. Like, am I up to it? If I open that door, can I really do it? Would I really do it? So this is sometimes what goes in my mind. But I learned that when this happens, I just fire those saboteurs, and I say to them, today is not the day for you. You're fired. I don't need you. When it's depression day, I will call you in, and we can sit on the sofa and do whatever we wanted to do.
Exactly. Isn't that the truth, right?
Yes.
And let's just see here. Oh. And I use this if I truly am stuck and I don't know what question to ask. I've used this before, and it actually works remarkably well. If I can ask you one powerful question, what would it be? And then don't say anything and let the other person think about it. And that really gets them to think, what really is the barrier? So those are some examples of exploring. There's many, many more. I have 100 questions, or 110 that I've developed just for some of my clients that I work with. But those are just some of them that you can work with. Can anyone think of anything else? If you can, pop in the chat and let me know. The next one is building the foundation. So now you understand what the concern is, and you're going to try to build up an action plan. So what does your intuition or your gut tell you about this? So this works with about 50% of the people. So people who lead with intuition, like myself, it really helps them. But people who are really, truly analytical struggle with this. You can ask them that. If they say they don't know, that's okay. And if you know they really are analytical, So if you're working with having a conversation with an accountant, you may not want to ask this question. You can say, instead of intuition, you can say, well, what do you think the facts are telling you? Or what's the story telling you? Oh, let me just, who can help you with this? This is another powerful one because a lot of us think that we have to do everything on our own, and we don't. So they may be able to bring in a team or even a few other people to help them brainstorm or help them with this project or the issue. Is this the best outcome you can imagine, or is this something greater? So usually your first solution isn't your best one. And that's why brainstorming meetings are so good, because when you brainstorm ideas, you start to build on your greatness and you build on more ideas. So I usually ask this question because people start to really reflect and think on it more. And then I want to know what's stopping them from taking action. So I'm curious about this one, and not from a judgment perspective, but I'm curious why they haven't moved on it before now. And there could be a history about why they haven't moved on it, or they just could have simply been too busy, or they hadn't thought about it beforehand. But this question may tell you a lot more about the story, because you're going to get a lot more information. And what does success look like to you? So at your end of your project, or the end of, if you're helping somebody plan a difficult conversation, at the end of the conversation, what does success look like? So those are some things that I ask, because if people can envision success, it'll help them plan towards it. And then you can really help them focus on, is this really the right choice for them? But I'm not going to ask it that way, because it's not about me, it's about the other person. So I'll say to them, will this choice move you forward or keep you stuck? And again, it doesn't matter what I think at all, because it's not about me and it's not about you when you're asking these questions. It's just helping that person think about will it. And then what would be the impact of not succeeding? Because they really need to understand that if they are not successful, is there any fallout? So there may not be, but if there is, they also need to plan for that situation as well, and they need to have a contingency plan. So any thoughts on building the foundation? So do you see how we're moving? So the first stage was really about getting them thinking about what the problem was and getting them to articulate it clearly. Now we've got them thinking about, okay, how am I going to build a foundation, and really what do I need to do to take action? Now the final stage is where the excitement is going to happen, and you're securing commitment. So what steps could you take that would make the biggest difference right now? So some conversations don't have to be multi-year plans. They mainly need to do one or two quick things to get a quick win, and that's all that's required. Or it could be a longer plan. It just depends on where they want to go. And do you have a detailed strategy to get there? So strategies are like roadmaps. If you don't have a strategy, all you have is a wish. And strategies and goals are the same. And I always tell people that you need to have a strategy, and it needs to be written down, because that's going to keep you forward focused and forward thinking. And really you're just going to keep drilling down and really helping the person reach their goal. So what's the first step you need to reach that goal? And it could be anything. And I'm going back to that difficult conversation. So if they want to have a difficult conversation with somebody about a meeting, or they want to build trust, what's the first step do they need to take to meet that goal? Or if they're starting negotiations with a union, or if they're implementing a policy, what's the first step they need to reach their goal? So it could be small, medium, or big. It doesn't matter what the issue is. These are the same questions that, or the same types of questions that I usually ask. And then who do you need to champion? Because if you have a champion behind you that's supporting it, it's going to be successful. So if they're rolling out a policy, who do they need to get on board before they actually roll out the policy? And identifying in advance, what are their roadblocks? Because the roadblocks have to be part of their strategy. And if they could identify any and all roadblocks now, that really is going to help them be successful. And it's going to help them start to think about what the potential pitfalls are. And keep in mind, they don't have to have all the answers now, but at least it's going to start them thinking. And this is one of my favorite questions. So you've got your goal and you've got your strategy, and that includes timelines on when and where and how you're going to get there. But if you're saying yes to other projects and other tasks, what are you saying no to? And what you're probably, and I would never say this part, but in my mind, I would be thinking what you're probably saying no to is your project or your goal. And this question is really going to help them be focused. So if they really have a tight timeline, I'll then say to them, so you only have X amount of time. What I'm hearing you say is you have X amount of time to reach your goal. So how are you clearing your calendar to make that work for you? And if they haven't thought about clearing their calendar, I would ask them, what are your thoughts about blocking off meetings? Or what would that look like for you if you blocked off one morning a week? Whatever it is, just keep asking that question, because they, again, part of their goal and their strategy is they need to create space to achieve it. And finally, how can I support you? So what do you need from me? It could be they need regular check-ins just to see how they're doing, maybe regular coaching conversations, maybe regular meetings just to keep them on track. Or they may not need anything, and just the fact that you're there is great. But ask that question, because it comes back down to being supportive, and everybody needs to know that they feel supported. So any questions on securing commitment? So those are the three areas. So it really comes down to, and I hate to say this, it comes down to listening. So when I first started coaching, all these questions that I wrote in front of me, and finally what I realized was those questions were distracting me from listening. So just in your mind, just really think about what's the issue, how are you going to build the foundation, and how are you going to get commitment? And if you can focus on that, then you can really help your person. Now, here's some final thoughts. And I'm really sincere when I say this. The person you're coaching has all the answers. And sometimes they just need a different perspective. And that different perspective is the questions that you're asking. And you may have to ask the same question a couple different times in different ways before it jogs something with them. But all the brilliance is inside of that other person, and they know the answers. They just need a different way of looking at a problem. If you manage people, I find unless it's a gross misconduct, coaching usually works more effectively than discipline. So if any of my team and any of the teams that I've managed, if there's any infraction that's not immediately disciplined, like say if they haven't stolen anything or done anything that terrible where you would automatically jump to a discipline or a termination. I would use a coach approach with them to ask them, you know, what happened? What did you learn? How can you do it differently so it doesn't happen again? That's more effectively because we're all adults, and that's going to resonate more than if somebody treats you like a child, because we're all adults. And the only time telling works is if it's an emergency. So if there's a fire, you're going to tell people to get out of the building. But coaching is always, always better than telling. And again, you need to ensure that you have trust, and that coaching is probably one of the most sacred relationships you can have. And it has to be that safe space, and it's not your story to share. And I always say that at the beginning of every coaching relationship. Samir, I didn't do it with you because we were doing just an example for the webinar, but I always say at the beginning of every coaching conversation I have, unless you're doing something illegal, it's not my story to share, and it's in confidence, and it's up to you. You can tell whoever you want, but it has to be a safe container here. That way people really will be vulnerable with you. And don't be afraid to lean in and ask those hard questions. And remember, when you're coaching, there is no wrong question if you come from a place of caring and intention. And what's critical about that first bullet is caring and intention. So if you care, people know that, and they know that the questions you're asking are from that place. And really listen to see what the person's concerned about. And if you get stuck, just ask them to tell you more about that. Or what would help you right now? How can you move forward? And this is a personal favorite of mine. What's keeping you up at night? Because what's keeping you up at night usually is the biggest issue that people are dealing with. For me, what keeps me up at night are people. And if my people are struggling, whether they're my team or my clients, that's keeping me up at night. And if you don't change this, what will it cost you? And cost isn't just financial. It also could be emotional. It could be a lack of trust. It could be a lot of different factors. So really think about, if you don't change your behavior or don't change the direction it's going, what's that personal cost? And professional as well. It could be damage to your relationship or the university. Okay, so we have probably 2 minutes left. I know we started a few minutes late. So this webinar was all about asking the perfect questions. I would love to hear from you, any of the 4 bullets. So were there any questions that resonated with you, or maybe on the flip side, you didn't land or you didn't think worked? And did anything surprise you? Or anything else? So over to you.
And you're all have been enabled to speak. Just take your mutes off.
It always makes me nervous when you're quiet, because I don't know if you're engaged, if you're busy, or if you, if it was so fabulous that you just don't have any questions. Samir.
Yeah, for me, it was that question about if I have to ask you a question, what would that question be?
Oh, did you like that or not?
Yes, I like that a lot, because I used to do coaching for a while.
Okay.
And sometimes I felt that I really ran out of powerful questions. And I know it has to do with establishing the rapport, but sometimes I felt like I had run out of powerful questions. So that question would be a lifesaver.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad. And it's shocking how well it actually works. I was shocked the very first time I asked that.
Yes, it is very much so. So thank you for the reminder.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you again.